Hello and welcome to the Stranger Than Fiction audiobook. My name is N.B. Austin, author of Stranger Than Fiction, Corruption and Crimes Against Humanity in the COVID Era. The reason why I wanted to make this video before we get started with the book and dive right in is because I wanted to let you know this will be available on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. The reason why I wanted to let you know it will be available on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey is because YouTube will take one of the episodes down. Each episode corresponds with a chapter, and certain chapters, as you can probably imagine, are a little dicey as far as what YouTube, which hates the truth, allows. As we'll find, YouTube proudly brags about having taken down over 1 million videos during the COVID era to fight misinformation. And so, for this reason, we'll also be publishing on Rumble and Odyssey, where you can find any missing chapters. I will hopefully come out with a video for each missing chapter and let you know on YouTube that this chapter will not be available here. For this reason, it is also a great way to support if you're enjoying the audiobook by going on Amazon and buying a book, whether that's ebook or paperback. It's not censorable if you own it. So it's the best way to both support and to have this information available in the future as a resource with all the citations and everything you would need to know. One last thing, if you do buy a book, make sure to leave a review. It's the nicest thing you can ever do. Or just reach out to me directly, but do both actually. Reach out to me directly, leave a review, do all the good things, get this information out there and help support. Thank you and enjoy. You are listening to Stranger Than Fiction, Corruption and Crimes Against Humanity in the COVID Era, an audiobook by N.B. Austin. Chapter 1, from the author, Part 1, in Introduction. A few years ago, I came upon a memoir written by my long-since deceased great-grandfather, Nicholas. The content of it wasn't particularly long, maybe 20 pages or so handwritten, nor was it written with a ton of detail. The fact that he wrote it at all was no small accomplishment, however, as my grandfather told me his dad had actually taught himself how to write. Nicholas's memoir told the story of how he'd come to America from Turkey during the early 20th century due to the oppression of the Greek population at the time. From there, it primarily documented different aspects of his life and times in this new country he'd come to love so much. The most fascinating thing about this book to me, other than the background it gave me on my family, was that it provided a first-hand account of the experiences and attitudes of a different time. This included things like his feelings toward different cultural figures and events, and his relationships with his wife and family. Those dynamics were very different from what we experience today. But they were also different from what we understand of that time, based on what we are now told of it by people who weren't there. This was my first real epiphany about the unmatched value of a primary source. And so, having written and self-published 3 fiction books at that point, I thought it would be a cool idea to transcribe and publish his memoir. But this book is not an advertisement for that one. The memoir is priced at cost on Amazon, as a matter of fact. This book is simply the result of what my great-grandfather taught me, which, given the timing of my coming upon it, I can only attribute to God's plan for me. You see, I am a health data scientist by trade, specifically a rigorously trained morbidity and mortality risk expert. The COVID era has been wild enough to live through at all, but to be in this profession at this time has been particularly jarring. No matter what you think about the subject, the amount of data being tossed around and conclusions being made based on that data is unprecedented. To be honest with you up front, dear reader, describing my feelings toward it at all will be a serious challenge. It's simultaneously been one of the most interesting and difficult things I've ever experienced. As you will find in this incessantly cited book, the amount of documentation I've gathered since the COVID era began has been like no project I've ever worked on. In that way, I guess you could say I've had a passion for the subject. And while in the final chapters I will outline the personal hardships I've experienced during this time, I cannot say I am bitter about any of the exceptionally heavy information I've gathered in the chapters which will precede that one. It simply is what it is, and to despair about it is to be defeated by it, in my opinion. In fact, For all the hardship, there has been far more fortune. As such, I will look back on this period fondly. That said, the information is heavy, so please either prepare yourself for that or stop reading now if your mind isn't open to a new perspective on this subject. I am documenting this now because I feel I must for the sake of future generations. While that might sound dramatic, in a time defined by ubiquitous censorship, it isn't remotely so. Because as much as I've learned the importance of primary sources from my great-grandfather's memoir, I've learned the consequences of lacking those sources due to the actions of today's petty tyrants. In fact, over the past decade, I've seen everyone from regular talk show personalities to even gamers being either muted or outright removed from platforms built on government subsidization. These people did not commit crimes of any kind. They lawfully exercised their God-given right to free speech, most of the time in an insightful or comedic way. But converged American institutions have increasingly punished them for it. It's gotten so bad at times that my favorite comedian's wife, who isn't in the public eye at all, was even prevented from using one such platform to rent out a home. But if the entirely sourced information I am to present here and the attitudes toward it, such as mine, are not documented, I see it as a very real risk they will not be made available for the benefit of posterity at all. This cannot be permitted, since such a preventable disaster as this will entirely come to pass again. And that's what COVID was, a disaster of public health. Throughout this book, I will document why and how this happened in painstaking detail. Over the course of reading it, you might also recognize changes in how I describe things. For example, if my goal was to prove that birds are actually robots, I would still call them birds until I demonstrated clearly they were robots, at which point I would call them what I felt they'd been shown to be, namely robots. I do this because I am making a case which I intend to prove. I am simply starting from the perspective of today's prevailing narrative so that the case can be built to demonstrate why that narrative is so very wrong, where it is wrong. Also, there will be opinions peppered into the analyses throughout the book. All opinions are entirely my own and are simply conclusions drawn based on the documented information I present. Not one opinion I will provide will be given without said supporting documentation. All data is as of September 7, 2021 or later. Thank you for reading, and I hope it helps you understand what has transpired in some way.